afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jonathan, for including me in this session. Christoph, it's a pleasure to meet you, um, and thank you for the very kind introduction. You know, in many ways, this conversation is maybe going to be the opposite of the last session that you just had. You know, you listen to lawyers talk about legal frameworks, you talk to, people who are selling property and really adept at it. And I wanted to have more of a philosophical question, a philosophical conversation. You could say, what isn't a branded residence to begin with? Everything is a branded residence, including my house where I live, as a private space. And I would love to talk a little bit, Christoph, with you about, what it is to have the difference between a residence and a home. I think philosophically, there are components here. I have grown an allergy with the word branded residences, luxury hospitality, purely because they've become very chubby terms which have been either used or abused or misused in different forms in different markets, and all of these sort of various things. When we talked about this a little earlier, now, how do you navigate this brand carnival? You have a carnival from, and I can see Four Seasons residences and me checking into a place or owning a property. I can see a level of tangibility because of maturity and legacy. But how do I assign a value to a Bugatti or a Mercedes residence, and then try, and what is, and how superficial is it? Because you see it all over, right? You see all these amazing big massive hoardings with big I guess renders of these very sort of gilded palaces that you check into or you can acquire, and then you see a Mercedes logo or you see something else from automotive brands, and suddenly a fashion brand has suddenly come up, and there are regional fashion brands, fashion designers who are branding residences. I find the whole thing quite superficial and shallow and meaningless, and I can see it from a premium that you would have from selling an asset. And then how do you then have some tangible value beyond just the badge on the door, and or what I call the concierge premium? What I would love to sort of maybe start the conversation, Christoph, and maybe ask you. You've done this very successfully with hospitality by coming in and bringing a protagonistic perspective on how experiences need to be created within the urban context. What to you is a home, and what to you is a residence?
Thank you, Gaurav, and I'm very happy that I can have this conversation with you. We pretend to have a glass of wine next to the chimney and become philosophical, and I hope we can achieve that. I don't know much about branded residences, honestly. I created 25 Hours, which is, I would not even call it a brand, but it was something which we created very much out of our gut feeling. We wanted to do hotels with a lot of individuality, soul. We loved to use the word storytelling. So before we started every hotel, we said we need to have like a story behind, like a script we do when we do a movie. We want to have a content. We don't want to do hotel restaurants and hotel bars. We want to give each and every space we create a certain purpose. So that's how we started, and we were luckily super successful back in the days. And then fast forward, after we have done Dubai, 25 Hours Dubai, together with Accor, who we joint ventured with, or we sold us to Accor at some point. The property in Dubai became very successful, I think, because of its public space and because of its hub for, like very different people here in Dubai, and I was very happy to see that. And then when we got approached for the first time to do residences, I had a similar feeling like you. To me, when I passed by at a branded residence, it always felt kind of cold to me, because I only imagined, having the doorman standing downstairs, having standardized designed apartments on different floors. And how do you live there? Don't you get lonely if you have some sort of a space like that? That was my feeling and my idea about it. So when we started diving deeper into what could a branded residence mean for 25 Hours, we used a German word first as a idea, but it's part of the brand now. We call it Heimat, and Heimat means, if you translate it word by word, home, but it means much more than this. It means a certain, feeling or the scent when you when you when you have your favorite dish from your mother, or when you go to your favorite bar, when you go to your first apartment where you used to live. This is Heimat, and I think, at least I believe, that people long for this feeling more and more, and connectivity. And can we change that idea of a residence into something which is like a home to people?
Okay, now it's fascinating to see that because, my observation in a similar way is that, hospitality went through various waves of change over from the 50s to the 60s, all the way up to now in the 21st century where we are today, 2025. And you observe how loyalty programs needed to be differentiation drivers. Culinary experiences became, differentiation drivers at different stages through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And then homogenization of standardization of room categories, etc., so you could scale and grow. When you look today, I feel that today branded hospitality, if I to zoom out a bit, suffers from hyper homogenization, possibly hyper standardization, takes away a lot of that. We talked about it in the last 10 years at least. I've been talking about content programming, not within the physical space. It's actually what happens in the space that matters. And you could in some ways say, what learnings do you take away? For me, in your opinion, one could say that unbranded residences should command a premium, not branded residences, because unbranded is really the true, thumbprint on something that you believe is a true demonstration of or validation of yourself as an individual. So what is broken in society today that people are chasing Bugatti apartments?
I think it was. I don't know. You know better. At the end of the day, I think you investigated much deeper here. But what I can see is that it's just getting too much when it comes to branding and to the multitude of brands, not only in residences but only in hospitality. And I could imagine that people have, the urge to get away a little bit from that standardization of brands and trying to be, put in different brackets and to say, okay, I'm part of that group which is Bugatti, or I'm part of the group which is, I don't know, Langosteria. Everything is
says a lot about society, though, doesn't it? If that's the status validation you seek.
yeah.
But by the same note, jokes aside, I think from a developer's perspective, I would imagine they seek to associate with aspirational brands because there's a premium or a pricing uplift. And the model is proving itself. Like we are noticing that we've seen this successfully. People have sold a lot of real estate. In that context, as the industry evolves, what do you think are the things that you would like to do with Heimat, let's say, which would be different from, let's say, what some of the legacy hospitality operators would bring to the table? Where do you see opportunities of innovation, change, and meaningful, not just a return on investment for the developer but also for the end user?
What we're trying to achieve here in Dubai is our first project, and of course I'm very excited about it. And when we started doing the project, the aim was not to focus so much on the residences as such. I mean, that's there, and we will have beautiful apartments designed by Studio Eislinger, one of our favorite designers back in Berlin. But we focus much more on how can we bring people together? How can we make this residence a social hub, a place where people can interact with each other more on an analog basis? What means public space? What means trying to bring people together in community? For example, our idea is that we have like a big community kitchen where, let's say, we would have 2 apartments where we could, just first of all connect, which is probably not normal in a residence building where you have the means to say, okay, who lives on the 75th floor or on the 34th floor? Is that someone who I could, spend some time with? And can I go and cook with him or her together in our community kitchen? Can we play paddle tennis together? How can we bring all those
This
people
sort of
together?
sense of community and neighborhood, like, we are renowned in Dubai also not to know our neighbors, whether you're
Yeah,
living in a
yeah,
gated community
yeah,
or whether you're in a tower block. So
yeah.
how do you look at, building a sense of community and neighborhood? And I think those are shared values. These are things that you have to drive also. I think as much as you can talk about the air conditioner working, which is sort of a given in order to be able to command anything in a place like this. I think when you look at private spaces, shared spaces, programming, I think community based living components, like we have a lot of opportunity, I guess, in many ways. You have, whether it's young people today who want to socialize more than people like myself who would rather not meet a lot of new people when I'm back home. So when you look at it like that, that oscillation, where do you see an opportunity? Is it the mid segment? Is it, affordable? Accommodation which is aspirational still, or is it in the sort of luxury segment? Like, because for me, the more higher up you go, you also need a degree of personalization. Like I was working with somebody recently who wants to sell $150 million villa, which is already sort of pre-cooked and fabricated. Now, like if I had that kind of money, I would leave my signature on every square meter of the place.
Mm.
So how do you balance this tension between personalization and standardization in branded residences? How will you address that?
First of all, I think it goes way beyond luxury, that branded residence concept. And I think we should also ask ourselves the question, why is it such a big trend to go this path? And I see also a trend there, like in the fact that people want to become much, much more flexible when it comes to where they live, where they work, how they can work. Nowadays, you don't have to have an office anymore. I mean, a few people still don't need it, but a lot of people are much more flexible. And I think this is also something which pays into the trend of branded residences, or in residences in the first place. Where can I spend my life? Do I have to be in one spot in, Zurich 12 months out of a year? Or can I share spaces? Can I go to different spaces? Can I work 3 months out of a year out of a different space? I think that trend supports very much the idea of residences. And we would not have been asked to do a residence as 25 hours. Wouldn't it be for a different segment? I'm not saying mid-scale, but something which is, a bit more relaxed and a bit more not as private as the residences as we know them right
Yeah,
now.
and I think that, developers need to be mindful of this also, I guess, when they're developing the actual, you know, the units, I guess, in many ways. You think about the maturity of Dubai today from a transient to a permanent, base. You've got more people spending more time here. First home versus second home. What are you actually buying? Is it seasonal? Will you only utilize it? People put it back, their assets into rental pools so they can get a yield in it. And you look at this sort of fractional, serviced, and branded hybrid, this sort of cocktail of opportunities that people are trying to service. And I also think from a design point of view, there's a great opportunity to innovate. Like, I don't know how many people who have spent more than 3 to 6 months in an apartment which they own have got even sufficient space to store their luggage, because typically you have nowhere to keep. If you have a family, you most probably have 8 to 9 big suitcases where you put them. These things sort of make me wonder sometimes, just as a end user, that what works, and we've seen this, I've seen this in serviced residences, also service apartments. You add a microwave and a little kitchenette, and suddenly that hotel room is now a service apartment. It doesn't work. How do you address these things? And then there is also the amplified risk of brand tap out. Brands can have seasonal challenge, or they can have
Yeah.
faux pas. We've witnessed that with high street brands or luxury brands. Suddenly, you'll have one of the LVMH brands, I'm not going to name them, is not in favor by anybody right now,
Mhm.
purely because of things that they've done. So now, if you happen to own an apartment with the same logo on it, it says a lot about you, and you can't quite, not you can't hide that.
Yeah.
So there is a tension here also to reconcile about, in many ways, should we be telling hoteliers to stay in their swimming lanes? Do what you do really well, or make it better, and maybe allow the branded asset component to be layered with more vertical value integrations, or introduce new brands that address that, like you're trying to do.
Yeah. And while you were talking, I was also thinking about the possibility that residences could become more of a sharing concept or more of a membership concept as well. I'm working on another concept back in Europe called Embassies of the Good Living, and it's something where you buy into a possibility of being in Dubai, but also having the chance to be in London or in other places of the world where you can spend time in different phases of the year. And why not combining those aspects with the residence idea?
No, very good. And I think to conclude, I'm sure it's the last day of the event, and I'm sure people have run to a certain degree a point where they need to either stretch their legs or head to another conversation. As we wrap up, I think I'd like to thank everyone for listening to us. As I recap, the thing that I'd like you to take away is the difference between what is superficial, or the wallpaper version of branding versus meaningful interventions that induce true value in a sustainable manner, with also looking at addressing the opportunities that lie in front of us by figuring out how to oscillate between personalization and standardization. I think from a design development perspective, that's a key takeaway. I think from an operational delivery perspective, trying to think beyond just the lobby and the concierge and the gym. How do you actually drive value through meaningful interventions that improve quality of life? Thank you, everyone, for listening to both of us. I hope we gave you something to think about. And once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Christoph.
Thank you.